one of the things that we're really looking at now is one of the things that I think is probably no surprise to anybody here, but what has been really shifting are the motivations of volunteers and people in general, right? Why do we give back, right? And it's important for us to keep our finger on that pulse. One thing that's unique about New York Cares, about 70% of our volunteers are between 18 and 34, which is unusual in the volunteer sector, right? So one of the things that happens are generational shifts in how we look at service, how we utilize technology. Those impact us immediately, right, as folks are coming in the door. For a variety of reasons, we're very concerned about what was motivating our volunteers right now at this moment in time. As you probably know, a lot of individuals are taking what is volunteerism, and that is extending into more political activity, a general, if you will, social justice stance on the work and how we show up in our communities, and articulated in a way that's much more direct and clear than it's ever been. And so one of our questions always is, are we staying relevant, if you will? So one bit of survey, and you'll start to see a lot of changes coming up. If you follow us, you'll start seeing a lot of changes in communication. This survey, we were looking at the motivations of our volunteers. And I can tell you, back when we did the leadership ladder, we did similar surveys. The number one motivation for folks was always to make New York City a better place to live. And that is still in there. But what is forefronted in a way that it's never been before is that I volunteer because of the values I hold, right? That volunteering is an expression of my values. You can also see, and we broke this out by borough, and I'll explain why in just a second, right? So as we're starting to see what these motivators are, fascinating one, by the way, because New York Cares is group volunteering, people always consider that like meeting people is one of the primary motivators. We're seeing it really is not for our volunteers. One thing we did discover, though, that was interesting, it's not a reason people start, but it's a reason they stay, which was interesting. So if you came to meet people, you probably didn't continue, but you continue because you met such wonderful people. So questions of motivation really matter. Interestingly, religious motivations or other required service, like for, say, you're going to school and you have a public service requirement, were very minimal. So what this does for us, of course, is then it's triggering now messages in or changes in our messaging around how we motivate you to start, probably what kind of messages you will respond to. And it's also very, just as an aside, as an organization like we are, people bring whatever, political beliefs, whatever, motivations they have for volunteerism. Our goal is to make sure anyone who wants to give back can in the community. And so as an organization, we've kind of stayed away from espousing any value other than we should give back in our communities. Right? And so really starting with the last presidential election, we've been able to be more direct about, what people see in this community or what they're seeing in their communities, and how they might want to change it without stating an opinion on whether it's right, wrong, whatever it may be. But we're actually able to start activating more on people's values. Other thing that we're seeing a lot of, and this, by the way, absolutely mirrors what's happening in the workforce, which is our volunteers actually want to gain greater understanding of the issues through their volunteer service. And this, by the way, is noticeably different from older volunteers, right, who want to give back. They don't necessarily think of learning about the issue area as being a motivation. They do see it as a tangential benefit of having done it, but they don't need it to be a learning experience, right? And so the same way we're seeing a desire in the workforce for more professional development, more learning experiences in the office, folks are also looking for there to be more learning experiences through their service experience. And now our programmatic question is going to be, how do we rise up to meet that? And that'll be coming up in a moment. Just mentioned here, right, values were the most highly rated motivation, and religious and career were actually lowest, which we find interesting. And as we think about expanding around New York City, one of the things we want to be mindful of is there's a very, very rich culture of service in most religious communities. And to think about how our work, can either function alongside of that, complement it to figure out how we serve all communities fully is a big question for us.